Sam Harris has revealed himself to be one of the most intellectually dishonest commentators of our time, and nowhere is this more evident than in his recent remarks about Islam being a no-pussies religion that's explicitly macho and appeals to people like Andrew Tate. This isn't serious analysis, it's the desperate flailing of a secular intellectual whose entire worldview has been exposed as bankrupt, and who now resorts to crude reductionism and cultural prejudice to maintain his relevance. Harris's comments about Islam reveal not the problems with Islamic civilization, but the complete intellectual collapse of secular liberalism and its inability to understand what it's actually competing against. Let's dissect Harris's argument systematically, because every single claim he makes demonstrates either profound ignorance or deliberate misrepresentation.
Well, I mean, Islam is just mimetically, it's perfect for a specific audience. You know, it's a explicitly macho religion, right? It's a no pussies religion, right? It's just and it's just, you know, it's a, like with Christianity, you have to pretend.
All pussies?
Well, you have to pretend to be happy to be losing for the longest time. And you're basically just waiting for Jesus to come back and rectify this grave injustice.
Harris claims Islam is medically perfect for a specific audience, meaning frustrated young men who want to feel masculine and powerful. This reductive psychologizing reveals Harris's fundamental inability to engage with Islam as a serious intellectual and spiritual tradition. He's reduced one of the world's major civilizations to a psychological compensation mechanism for male inadequacy, which is exactly the kind of sophomoric analysis you'd expect from someone who thinks human consciousness can be explained by neural firing patterns. Harris contrasts Islam with Christianity, claiming that Christianity is a loser's religion where adherents must pretend to be happy to be losing while waiting for Jesus to return, whereas Islam has an expectation that they're going to conquer the world. This comparison is so historically and theologically illiterate that it's embarrassing. Christianity conquered the Roman Empire, built Western civilization, and dominated global culture for over a millennium. The idea that Christianity is a loser's religion could only come from someone whose knowledge of Christian history apparently begins and ends with modern evangelical pietism. Harris is confusing contemporary American Christianity's political impotence with the historical reality of Christendom, which shaped law, philosophy, art, science, and governance across multiple continents for centuries.
With Islam, there's an expectation that they're going to conquer the world, right? And there's an imperative to conquer the world. It's explicitly retrograde. I mean, it is regressive. It is backward-looking. It is not using all of the good ideas we've had in the meantime, right? It's like it's a disavowal of the present and the near present. I mean, the modernity. In the case of Islam, it's a disavowal of nearly 1,400 years of wisdom and insight.
But Harris's misunderstanding of Christianity pales beside his ignorance of Islam. He claims Islam is explicitly retrograde and regressive because it looks back to 7th century Arabia, representing a disavowal of nearly 1,400 years of wisdom and insight. This is historically illiterate nonsense. Islamic civilization produced the Islamic Golden Age, preserved and expanded Greek philosophy, developed advanced mathematics and science, created sophisticated legal systems, and built one of history's most successful and enduring civilizations. The idea that Islam rejected post-7th century wisdom is contradicted by Islamic achievements in philosophy, science, law, and governance that continued for centuries after Muhammad's death. Harris is apparently unaware of figures like Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Khaldun, or the entire tradition of Islamic jurisprudence and theology that developed over more than a millennium. Harris's claim that Islam's appeal is fundamentally about masculine compensation reveals his own secular civilization's crisis of meaning and purpose.
And if you take this really far, if you become a jihadist, right, you're especially doctrinaire, militant, true believer, well, then you're a kind of spiritual James Bond. I mean, then it's like you get to be Jocko and care about and know that you're going to go to paradise. Right, like so you get all the tools. Like it's the first person shooter that literally you get all the good guns.
He describes jihadists as wanting to be spiritual James Bond figures who get all the good guns in a first-person shooter mentality. This video game analogy perfectly captures Harris's inability to understand religious motivation as anything other than psychological pathology or power fantasy. The idea that religious commitment might represent genuine spiritual conviction, moral clarity, or civilizational loyalty is literally incomprehensible to Harris's secular mindset. He can only understand religious devotion as a form of male insecurity or violent fantasy, which reveals more about the spiritual poverty of his own worldview than about Islam itself. What Harris cannot grasp is that Islam's appeal isn't psychological compensation, it's civilizational superiority. Islamic societies provide meaning, purpose, community, moral clarity, and transcendent significance that secular liberal societies systematically destroy. When Harris mocks Islam as appealing to frustrated men, he's inadvertently admitting that secular liberalism has created the conditions that make men frustrated in the first place. Islamic societies don't produce epidemic male loneliness, sexual dysfunction, spiritual emptiness, and social atomization. Secular liberal societies do. Harris is criticizing Islam for successfully solving problems that his own worldview created and cannot address. Harris's analysis of Islamic conquest mentality versus Christian losing mentality reveals his fundamental misunderstanding of both religions and civilizational dynamics. He treats religious expansion as if it's primarily about domination and power, when historically it's been about meaning and community. People convert to Islam not because they want to conquer the world, but because Islamic civilization provides comprehensive answers to human needs that secular liberalism cannot meet. The growth of Islam in the West isn't happening through conquest, it's happening through conversion, higher birth rates, and cultural confidence. Harris's secular societies are being replaced not through violence but through their own demographic and spiritual failure. The most revealing aspect of Harris's comments is his complete inability to explain why Islam is growing while secular liberalism is dying. If Islam is just imbecilic, retrograde thinking that appeals to masculine inadequacy, why are Islamic societies thriving while secular ones collapse? Why do Islamic communities have strong families, cultural confidence, and demographic vitality while secular liberal societies have epidemic depression, social fragmentation, and birth rates so low they require constant immigration to maintain basic economic functions? Harris's analysis cannot explain these obvious empirical realities because his secular framework lacks the conceptual tools to understand what makes civilization successful.
And it's not to say, again, it's not to say there's nothing useful to come out of Islam, but whatever is useful we can use without believing that Muhammad was visited by the Archangel Gabriel and got the last, download from the creator of the universe. It's just not, this is not to deny any of the cultural problems that someone like Andrew Tate there's lots of people we've dragged into the conversation here, but like all of these people who I've criticized to some degree, Tate or RFK or you could add Elon to this. All these people are kind of living out the consequences of their dissatisfaction with the present on the public stage and winning a lot of followers as a result. They just like they like the way these guys are complaining about the obvious excesses of the left for the most part.
Harris claims we can extract whatever is useful from Islam without believing in Muhammad's prophetic mission or divine revelation. This perfectly encapsulates secular liberalism's parasitic relationship with religious traditions. Secular thinkers like Harris want to cherry-pick the practical benefits of religious wisdom while rejecting the metaphysical foundations that make those benefits possible. But you cannot separate Islamic ethics from Islamic theology, Islamic community from Islamic belief, or Islamic meaning from Islamic worship. The deeper problem with Harris's analysis is that he's applying Enlightenment rationalism to civilizational questions that rationalism cannot answer. Harris assumes that newer ideas are automatically better than older ones, that progress is linear and inevitable, and that traditional wisdom has been superseded by modern knowledge. But civilizational success isn't measured by intellectual sophistication, It's measured by demographic vitality, cultural confidence, social cohesion, and spiritual meaning. By these measures, traditional Islamic societies outperform secular liberal ones decisively. Harris's mockery of Islam as backward-looking reveals his own temporal chauvinism and historical ignorance. All successful civilizations are backward-looking in the sense that they preserve and transmit wisdom across generations. The alternative to backward-looking tradition is forward-looking innovation, which in secular liberal societies has produced gender confusion, family breakdown, spiritual emptiness, and demographic collapse. Harris's progressive societies are so advanced that they cannot even reproduce themselves biologically or maintain basic social institutions. When Harris dismisses Andrew Tate's conversion to Islam as the product of shallow thinking, he's missing the deeper phenomenon that Tate represents. Tate's conversion reflects the broader appeal of Islam to young Western men who have been systematically demonized, emasculated, and spiritually starved by secular liberal culture. Harris's society tells young men they're toxic, their masculinity is dangerous, their sexuality is predatory, and their traditional roles are oppressive. Islam tells them they're valuable, their masculinity is sacred, their sexuality is natural, and their leadership is necessary. Which message is more likely to produce psychological health and social stability? Harris's secular alternative offers young men nothing but therapy, antidepressants, and lectures about toxic masculinity. Islamic civilization offers them purpose, meaning, community, and respect. Harris then acts surprised when increasing numbers of young Western men find Islam attractive. This isn't because Islam is appealing to their psychological weaknesses, it's because Islam is meeting their spiritual needs while secular liberalism actively attacks those same needs. The irony of Harris's position is that his critique of Islam as macho and retrograde perfectly demonstrates why Islam is succeeding where secular liberalism is failing. Harris sees masculine strength, traditional values, and religious conviction as problems to be solved rather than human needs to be met. Islamic civilization sees them as foundational elements of healthy society. Harris's worldview systematically undermines everything that makes societies functional while Islam systematically strengthens those same elements. Harris's comments about Islam reveal the intellectual bankruptcy of secular liberalism more clearly than any religious critique could. He's reduced civilizational analysis to psychological reductionism, historical understanding to temporal chauvinism, and religious motivation to power fantasy. This isn't serious intellectual engagement. It's the desperate flailing of a worldview that has lost the ability to understand what it's competing against. The ultimate refutation of Harris's analysis is empirical reality. Islamic societies are growing, confident, and spiritually vital. Secular liberal societies are shrinking, demoralized, and spiritually empty. Islamic communities have strong families, clear values, and demographic futures. Secular liberal communities have broken families, confused values, and demographic death spirals. Harris can mock Islam as much as he wants, but he cannot explain why his supposedly superior secular alternative is failing by every measure of civilizational success. Harris's secular liberalism promised to liberate humanity from religious superstition and create rational, progressive societies. Instead, it has created the most irrational, self-destructive, and spiritually impoverished civilization in human history. Islamic civilization, despite its supposed backwardness, produces healthier families, stronger communities, and more meaningful lives than anything Harris's secular project has achieved. This isn't because Islam is perfect, it's because secular liberalism is fundamentally flawed as a basis for human civilization. The final irony is that Harris's attack on Islam as appealing to masculine inadequacy perfectly describes his own intellectual project. Harris has spent his career compensating for secular liberalism's obvious failures by attacking religious alternatives that actually work. His militant atheism, his obsession with Islamic violence, and his reductive psychologizing of religious motivation all reflect the insecurity of a worldview that cannot compete with what it's trying to replace. Harris represents the intellectual exhaustion of secular liberalism, a movement that has run out of positive vision and can only define itself in opposition to religious alternatives. His comments about Islam reveal not the problems with Islamic civilization, but the complete collapse of secular intellectual discourse into crude reductionism and cultural prejudice. Harris has become what he always claimed to oppose, a dogmatic ideologue who cannot engage seriously with opposing viewpoints. The tragedy is that Harris could have made valuable contributions to interfaith dialogue and civilizational understanding. Instead, he chose to become a secular fundamentalist whose militant materialism blinds him to the spiritual and social realities that actually determine civilizational success. His analysis of Islam tells us nothing about Islam and everything about the intellectual poverty of contemporary secular thought. Sam Harris's comments about Islam represent the death rattle of secular liberalism, a worldview so intellectually bankrupt that it can only understand religious civilization through the lens of psychological pathology and masculine compensation. Harris has revealed himself to be not a serious intellectual but a secular ideologue whose prejudices have completely overwhelmed his analytical capabilities. His critique of Islam is actually an inadvertent confession of secular liberalism's complete failure to understand what makes human societies flourish, and his own irrelevance in contemporary civilizational debates that have moved far beyond his narrow materialist assumptions.